Alright, hello and welcome to Camel Finance. I'm your boy Camel, and I've had a request to do a little dive into Bitcoin Taro. Taro is an abbreviation for Taproot Asset Representation Overlay. So that's going to be the topic of today. I will warn you ahead of time, once we get to about here, it's going to get quite technical. But anyway, let's get into it. Protocol update. This is what Taro is, a protocol update, and it operates at the outer edge of the Bitcoin protocol. So Taro doesn't actually change the Bitcoin base layer, it's built on top of the base layer. And the interesting thing about Taro is it operates right at the ends. So most of the nodes don't even have a reason to know about Taro. There's no reason to change, there's no need or reason to change the Bitcoin base layer for this to operate. And if you don't want to use Taro, you don't have to, you can just continue to use the Bitcoin base layer as you already do. Taro allows for Bitcoin and Lightning native tokens, stablecoins, NFTs, wrapped altcoins, and smart contracts to be issued on the Bitcoin blockchain, whilst Bitcoin continues to operate as normal. So most existing ways to issue or use assets on Bitcoin today either have to leverage another blockchain entirely, which adds a new trust model and different security assurances, or it relies on adding extra data directly on chain, which is inefficient for keeping track of asset information long term and is dangerous to user privacy. So to understand Taro, we first need to understand some technical stuff. We're going to do UTXOs, Merkle trees, and Taproot. Number one, UTXOs. A UTXO, or an unspent transaction output, you could think of, this is the simplest way I could find to explain it, you could think of these as like the tickets inside your wallet. So if your wallet contains 9.5 Bitcoin, it's likely that it isn't in there is one transaction output that contains 9.5 Bitcoin. Instead, it will be made up of these little tickets, these little unspent transaction outputs, and the sum of all of these will come to 9.5 Bitcoin. So how this would look in the real world is if you have 9.5 Bitcoin in here and you want to send 1.5 Bitcoin, if the way the protocol will work is it will choose the smallest UTXOs first. So if the smallest one of these tickets contains 1.5 Bitcoin exactly, then that's fine. You can send your 1.5 Bitcoin using that one ticket. If, for example, you had a few tickets that totaled 1.59 Bitcoin and you wanted to send 1.5, well, of course, you would end up with 0.09 Bitcoin left over. And this would be put into your wallet as an unspent transaction output. So you would get rid of 1.5 Bitcoin and end up with your little bit of change on one of these UTXO tickets in the wallet. So Bitcoin transactions work based on inputs and outputs, which are equal since coins are never destroyed. If you want to send me 5 Bitcoin, for instance, you would need to select precisely 5 Bitcoin, or else the transaction would either be incomplete or you'd have too many funds. For the former, Bitcoin can't really do much. You can't send funds that you don't have. But for the latter, Bitcoin will give you the rest as change. Therefore, if you select 7.38 Bitcoin to send me 5, 2.38 will go back to you as change. So this is what I was saying, you would get a little bit of change on one of these tickets in your wallet, the UTXO. So if you had 7.38 Bitcoin as an input and 2.38 plus 5 as your outputs, although you'd receive a little less in the real world because obviously some of it will go to transaction fees. So when we talk about spending, we're referring to an output. So if you spend some Bitcoin, that's an output. Now that you've sent me the 5 Bitcoin and I have that 5 Bitcoin, I can use it as I wish. I can send 3 Bitcoin to Alice and 2 to Bob, or I can send 5 to Joe, or I can keep the 5 and hold it indefinitely. Unless I choose to hold it, I will be making a transaction regardless of the use I make of my new Bitcoin. This latest transaction will get the 5 Bitcoin output that I have as an input, and this transaction's output will be whatever I decide to send. So notice that since I received 5 Bitcoin in full, even if I only want to send 3 Bitcoin, I will have to input all 5 of those Bitcoin into the transaction and I'll get the rest back as change. So in this system, all UTXOs are visible on the public chain. So that would be all tickets in our diagram here. Every single one of these tickets in the outputs are visible publicly. So the next thing we need to understand is what a Merkle tree is. A Merkle tree is a data structure with unique properties which make it useful for Bitcoin. Merkle trees are used to store all transactions in a given block, and the advantage of this is that one node can easily prove to another that a given transaction was contained in a specific block. This is useful for SPV nodes, special payment verification, that is, and light clients, who do not store the entire blockchain and are only interested in certain transactions or blocks. So for example, if Alice runs a wallet and is waiting for a transaction to confirm, but she does not run a node, she can request a Merkle proof from Bob, who runs a full node. This proof will convince Alice that the transaction she is interested in was included in a valid block, without Bob needing to share all of the transactions or the entire block with Alice. So from a technical point of view, a Merkle tree has layers. The first layer is the list of all the transaction IDs in a block, and to produce the second layer, these transaction IDs are hashed in pairs using the Bitcoin SHA-256 hashing function. So thus, the second layer will be half as long as the first layer, and this process is continued until the last layer contains exactly one hash, and this is known as the Merkle root. So given the properties of the hash, if a single transaction ID is changed, the change will trickle back up the tree and change the root hash entirely. And so here is what a Merkle tree with 8 leaves looks like. You can see that here, okay? So they get hashed and then hashed in pairs and then hashed one more time, and this forms the Merkle root hash. And of course, if you change any one of these, then that will affect the hash at the root. So in summary, the advantage of a Merkle tree is that the presence of any given transaction ID in a Merkle tree can be proven without revealing the entire Merkle tree. For example, in a Merkle tree with 8 transactions, only 3 hashes must be provided to prove one of the transaction IDs were included in that tree. And this provides great efficiency for light clients which do not store the entire blockchain and therefore must query other nodes for proof of certain transactions are confirmed. Okay, and so lastly, we need to talk about Taproot. So Taproot allows complex spending conditions to be set for a Bitcoin UTXO whilst ensuring that the only condition that ultimately gets used to spend the coin is revealed on-chain to all Bitcoin users. So remember back here where I said in this system, all the tickets in your wallet, all of these ones, are visible on the public chain. They're visible to the public. Well, using Taproot, only one of these tickets needs to be public. Only one is public, so you straight away get increased privacy from this Taproot upgrade that occurred in 2021. As a result, such a spend is more private because a passive observer cannot tell there were other spending conditions for that transaction. So therefore it's more scalable because that puts considerably less data on the chain. This is meaningful because the previous programmatic behaviors in Bitcoin meant transactions had to be revealed in their entirety wherever they were spent. This hurts user privacy and it makes very complex schemes unfeasible in scaling due to linear growth and storage needs. So Taproot makes everything more private and it also makes it more scalable. So by using Taproot, TARO can also rely on Bitcoin's proof of work consensus mechanism for ensuring the correct ordering of transactions and prevent double spends, whilst defining special directives as to how to interact and validate the new asset data. So TARO also differs from other asset solutions on highly programmatic blockchains such as Ethereum's ERC20 and ERC721 tokens because it's based on Bitcoin's UTXO model instead of the account model, meaning that it's both more secure due to the avoidance of key reuse and more private as there isn't information about the balances revealed, i.e. you can only see one ticket out of the wallet. TARO's approach is also more scalable and is compatible with light clients. And so just before we get into this TARO portion, more specifically, TARO brings assets to Bitcoin through the leaves of the Taproot script tree. So again, the leaves being these bits down here, right? Each leaf in the tree is completely independent and can be selectively revealed, and this enables structured commitment. So by adding information about those assets known as metadata in the Taproot script tree, the proposed protocol can function as a layer built on top of Bitcoin, allowing TARO asset transactions to look like regular Bitcoin transactions as on-chain only the Taproot output is revealed, while still enabling proofs of the movement of assets across the transaction graph. And so here we have the UTXOs. Again, this would be our tickets from the wallet, okay? And so what they do is insert a Taproot root hash into this, and this contains the Taproot script tree. And then all the way down at the leaf section at the bottom, as you can see here, we can actually insert these TARO assets. And this could be things like smart contracts, as I said at the start of the video. It could be NFTs, it could be stable coins, it could be wrapped altcoins. Many, many, many possibilities in here. And so TARO uses Taproot to embed asset metadata into the transaction output and set specific rules on how to interact with and validate this new asset data. Because the root hash of the TARO asset script is all that is included in the Taproot transaction, no observer can tell if it was a TARO transaction, as the hash could represent anything. So again, they're only seeing the hashes in between. Okay, so this is why it gets super private. We're talking about one ticket and only the hash of the thing that you're concerned with. So there's no real way of discerning it. The use of Taproot makes TARO quite different from asset solutions built on other blockchains. In many cases, these blockchains were account models rather than UTXOs, which means information about the balances is usually revealed. Again, back to that one ticket thing. So TARO uses a special variant of the Merkle tree called a Merkle sum sparse Merkle tree. And this is a combination of a Merkle sum tree and a sparse Merkle tree. You can go and read about these in your own time if you want to. I'm not going to, this is already way more technical than a normal video. TARO assets are embedded in the Taproot script tree of the Taproot UTXO, which is embedded in the Bitcoin transaction output. TARO uses Merkle sum sparse Merkle trees for scalability, tamper resistance, auditability, privacy, and proof of non-membership. The Merkle sum values in the green here indicate the TARO asset count in the branch, and these values make it easy to validate the supply and distribution. Most of the sparse Merkle tree is not drawn here, as the entire tree is 256 levels deep. It has 2 to the 256 leaves at the bottom, most of which are empty. The position of the leaves, which is in the blue here, in a sparse Merkle tree allows a user to prove they no longer own an asset, as their asset ownership is tied to that position. So how TARO assets will be issued and transferred? Well, TARO assets can be issued and transferred over the Bitcoin blockchain or the Lightning Network. For a user, there will be little practical difference besides the additional assets being displayed in their wallet, and an off-chain place to store the data that proves the TARO asset is authentic. So I'm not a fan of NFTs, but NFTs could well be a thing built on Bitcoin. Non-fungible assets are issued in a single limited edition batch in an on-chain transaction. These assets cannot be split or merged. They can only change ownership, which will happen off-chain by transferring a unique identifier, that was the number in blue, of the asset and its verification file or historical transaction data that proves the authenticity. This information is stored in TARO Asset Universe, which fulfill a similar role to a block explorer and can be run by anyone with an interest in the assets. The new owner of a TARO asset can examine the data in a TARO Asset Universe and use it to reconstruct the metadata of the blockchain and verify the ownership. They can also amend the metadata with their own proofs before passing on the asset. Whereas a fungible asset on TARO, such as a stablecoin, could be split and merged. And this means that if the user has an asset, it can change ownership inside an existing group of users that all have assets within the same Merkle tree, or the assets could be transferred to a user in a different Merkle tree. An updated version of the Merkle tree would simply show that the total supply of these assets hasn't changed, but the balances of the different owners have updated. And so when will this be usable? Well, it may take a while before TARO is available to users, as it's still in the early stages of development, and there's no guarantee that it will make it to implementation, as unexpected hurdles are always a possibility in software development. TARO was first proposed in April, and many people in the Bitcoin space have been given feedback on it since. Once the feedback is processed, eventually the final BIP, Bitcoin Improvement Proposal, may be submitted, after which a more rigorous analysis and evaluation will happen by the development community. This process, though, could take months or years, depending on the findings. With Bitcoin TARO, all altcoins could ultimately be built on Bitcoin if they have a real use case. Obviously, if they don't have a real use case, there's likely no reason to build them on top of Bitcoin. But just like the internet had a very strong base layer, and then we built many, many layers on top of it, it's quite possible that this is exactly what we'll see from Bitcoin. This is how money, perfect money like Bitcoin, continues to evolve. Use cases like smart contracts, stablecoin issuance, wrapped altcoins, all of these sorts of things will only add value to Bitcoin over time. The possibilities are endless, and I'm sure we will continue to see this be developed. If you want to go and see what's happening with TARO and you want to do further reading, then I recommend going to check this out. Type this into Google and you should be able to find this. So these things continue to be updated, continue to be pushed forward, and I look forward to seeing what comes out of this in the near future. If you found value here today, I'd appreciate it if you could drop a like on the video, subscribe if you're not already, and until next time, take care from me. All the best. Cheers. Bye.